It was revealed to me how much fear had sort of dominated my life in a way that I was unaware of. I was unaware of its even existence in my life until I had a moment in Spain where it was absent, and I suddenly felt like myself in a way that I rarely ever did, in the way that I wanted to feel.
Okay, so Andrew, are you ever in LA? Because I would have loved to have done this in person.
I haven't been for a while. I'm not going to be there till late May.
Late May. We could have waited to late May. I would have, because this whole virtual thing is like, I don't know. It loses so much personality. You know what I mean?
Okay, well, I can see you then.
But
It's
we
up
can
to
do this
you.
now. I mean, I'm just saying, I would have loved to have met you. I just, you know, it's great to meet you, and I'm excited about this interview.
Cool. Me too.
Listen, by the way, I'm sure you've heard this like a zillion times. I'm gonna do a proper, like a regular intro later, but you are literally my youth, right? Like I grew up on you, like not on you, but watching you. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
And I'm sure everybody says this to you. In fact, I'm curious, not your son, because you're kids, because they're, of course, you're past that, but I bet you the parents to the kids, like all are obsessed, right, with you?
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, to a generation of a certain demographic of a certain generation, I am the avatar of their youth. Yeah,
You
me
are.
and the
And
rest
that's
of the people.
exactly the way I actually wrote that down. I wrote the avatar of our youth because I heard you, I think, on Rob Lowe's podcast, and he was like talking about that. And you're like, it's not really you or them, it's more about what it represents. Like you are like a representation of my youth, which is so true, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see people literally, and they come up and they start talking to me and quoting lines or whatever, and literally their eyes kind of glaze over, and they're not really talking to me. They're talking about themselves at 20 odd years old, and but because also that's an amazing, wondrous moment of life when you're just sort of cusping into the world and you're just blossoming, and it's like, get out of the way, world, I'm coming out here, and it's an amazing moment. And we, Rob and I, and these are members of that kind of the Brat Pack or whatever, represent that to those people. So they look at them, they see me and whoever else, and really they're just seeing their own youth, and they project that goodwill and affection for themselves onto me and or us. And it took me decades, I have to say, to accept that as a wondrous kind of gift, because for a long time I just thought it was like, oh, come on, let's in the past, whatever, and but to finally, I guess it means just getting very old when you turn around and accept that youth as sort of a blessing, you know?
You know what's so funny? When I knew you were coming to the podcast, I started to, of course, delve into all your stuff. Like I didn't realize all the other credits, like that you're a director, a New York Times bestseller, all these things, which we'll talk about in a second. Which I found so interesting, though, about your whole, I guess, how you described the Brat Pack and your experiences were so antithesis to what I thought it would be, right? Because the way you perceived it was super negative, but yet like I felt like it gave you guys this like level of cachet that just made and that helped your career, not hindered your career. Do you know what I mean? And then
I do.
oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Are you going to say something?
No, I mean, over time, looking back now, if I'd been in the exact same movies I was in and the Brat Pack label did not exist, I would have just been some guy who was in some 80s movie gotten. Whereas it has elevated all of us into sort of this iconic stature of pop culture to, be representative of that moment in time. And it's like, and in Brat Pack, oh yeah, 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 yeah. So it's that. But at the time it was, the article, the New York Magazine article that it all sprang from was very negative and very pejorative and very kind of scathing. And so we hated it. And it also, I recently am in the process of finishing up a documentary about the Brat Pack, where I went and I talked to a whole bunch of the gang, and all of us had the exact same experience of it at the time, which was, holy shit, we just got some mud slung at us hard. We had no idea how to respond to it, and in many ways, we perceived it to be limiting to our careers. It's like Marty Scorsese, Steven Spielberg are not going to call up somebody who's in the Brat Pack, and that may have been true, but again, over time, it's going to be this iconic fuzzy phrase of, embracing, this moment in youth. And so it's going to be a beautiful thing. But at the time, it was everyone ran from it or tried to run from it. Everyone hated it. And it was cast in aspersion, and so it was a difficult thing at the time to live with. And then, I'd say, some people turned the corner on it more quickly than others. Like Rob was very savvy, media-wise, and he kind of realized, oh, the public kind of love this, and so he turned and embraced it very quickly. Whereas I just kind of tried to, you don't ever want to be labeled or boxed when you're an actor, particularly when you're young. You're just starting, and so suddenly you're labeled as something, and it's like it's limiting, or so it felt at the time, But like I said, and over the ensuing decades and centuries, it's become something quite other, and is a beautiful thing now. But at the time, yeah, as you said, we hated it, and it was not helpful.
No, what I find also, it was just like, it was actually so eye-opening, because I also, like, again, like, I was a kid. I was like, what, 12, 11. I was really young when all those movies were really out, and, even the Mannequin and Weekend at Bernie's, which is later. But I found like, what I found interesting is your experience even with the other people in the Brat Pack, right? Because it like, as a person watching these movies, I would think you guys were all like great friends, hanging out all the time, doing all these things together. Like you and Rob Lowe were like, hanging out, and you and Judd Nelson or whoever. And yet, like, you weren't really friends with anybody, like nobody besides
well, that speaks more to my own sort of sense of being a bit of a loner than anything else. And I happen to live in New York too. Everybody else sort of lived in LA, I think. But the second the Brat Pack label came out, everyone just kind of went and scattered, because it was perceived as a negative thing. And all those youthful ensemble movies kind of stopped that instant that happened, because nobody wanted to be perceived as part of any kind of gang or a brat. And so, there was a lot of camaraderie, I think, with a bunch of the guys before that. But after that, it really, that ended it in a large way. The very sort of naming of it, dismantled it.
It seemed like when in your book, The Brat, like you seem like you spoke very fond, like just now again, like of Rob Lowe and all that. How about, who else were you the closest? If you were to pick people that you were close with, were you close with Judd Nelson? Were you close?
I wasn't close with any of them at the time, and I didn't. Rob and I didn't really particularly get along back then. I just was texting about 5 minutes ago, because there's an article in the paper today about his new show with his son, and I know his son as well, and we were just texting back and forth. I was congratulating him, and but that never would have happened even 10 years ago. Rob and I, we did not get along. We were just very different guys. Rob loved being a fabulous movie star. That's not who I am. And so, and I have great affection for Rob, because he's so shameless in this way that's so delightful. He somehow gets away with it, in this way. And I just shake my head in kind of awe at his shamelessness. And it's somehow so charming on him, and winning. But I didn't really close with any of the guys. Judd Nelson he scared me. I didn't know what his was. Emilio seemed like the kind of savvy Hollywood insider, and I just felt like some kid from New York who didn't really know what was going on. So, like Anthony Michael Hall, I've never even met. So even though he's my Brat Pack brother, but so it was, it wasn't what it was perceived to be at the time. But like I said, going back and doing the documentary and seeing everybody again, to realize all this affection exists now in a way between us was kind of, a wonderful embracing of a past that I ran from.
And even the fact that you didn't date the girls, like I assumed before reading this stuff and like delving in, that I would assume that you would have dated Demi Moore, dated Ali Sheedy, dated all these people. And like, and even I was Googling and I'm like, Andrew McCarthy, Demi Moore, Andrew McCarthy, whoever, all the
you're not going to find it.
Nothing. Like zip. The only thing I found is that you hit on Courtney Cox, where I read about that and it never happened. You like went on a date with Elizabeth Shue, and she never called you again or something. That's all I found.
Yeah, you know, a lot of epic fails there, huh? But you know, I was never, yeah, that just, it wasn't my experience in my life. I was living this sort of different life back here in New York and stuff. So I didn't, that just didn't happen, you know. I did have a big crush on Mayor Whittingham when we were doing that film, The St. Elmo's Fire. So
I saw you wrote that. I've also, and like, but she was married with kids. That was what I saw too, right?
yeah, so that didn't work out. So
who else did you like attempt and then never ever, you know, I guess score with, so to speak?
oh gosh, I don't know. I think you kind of hit the big ones there. I don't know.
And like, didn't anyone come after you? Like again, like this is like my perception was is totally fleeced. Like I was expecting a totally different, you know, research manuscript when I got it. You know, I thought, oh my God, you would for sure be with this, every single starlet, every single model. And no, I didn't find anything.
I mean,
I found Twitter and you with the stripper. That's all I found.
yeah, there were a few moments, but I mean, you know, I also was not living a very public life. I tried, but you know, back in those days, you know, that's why I'm not very comfortable in a certain way on social media. Back when I was back in the day that we're talking about, you did everything you could to keep your private life private. You never exposed anything if you could help it to anyone. The reason you hired a publicist was to say no to people, you know. So the idea of broadcasting who you're seeing or whatever was just anathema to me. And I just, you know, I did everything I could to keep my private life private.
Right.
Now, I mean, no one cares. So, I mean, you know, it's different.
I care. I care. I care. It must be crazy, right? It's a totally different world right now because right now the biggest commodity is everybody wants attention, right? Everybody is like striving for attention. That's why social media is so rampant. Everyone wants to, they show everything from what they eat to like if they're like walking in a mall, like everything requires some type of promotion, right? It's like literally the opposite of how it used to be, you know, when you were.
It is. It's 180 degrees different. Yeah. I mean, it's now, there's something in, you know, some of that's a bit sort of desperate and sad, but some of it is, I think, interesting. I see my kids and they're of a generation where there's kind of this disclosure of things that I would have never revealed to people that weren't my intimate friends and family. You know, that there's something lovely about that kind of unabashed disclosure of certain foibles and insecurities or whatever that allow other people to kind of go, oh wow, you have that famous person, I have that too. And you know, so it makes people less alone in a certain way. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of things that we all complain about social media, but there's some aspects of it I think that are quite interesting and almost beneficial. You know, I think the biggest downfall of social media, of course, is that we don't get bored anymore. We don't daydream. We just constantly default to a device because we can't have a moment of stillness. That's probably but what's out there on social media doesn't particularly bother me. You know, everyone self-sifts through that crap.
I think, yeah. Well, I think it depends. I mean, if you have the ability to curate what you're looking at and following, you can do that. But yeah, to your point, everything is about the next dopamine hit, right? And then eventually those dopamine hits become less and less, so you need more and more. And you know, for kids, it's actually difficult because of the compare game, right? Because you're looking at everybody else and think that your life isn't as good as someone else's. Because you know, social media is a real. It's not real life. It's like snippets of people's lives, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, of course.
It's a totally different thing. So then, yeah. So let's start. Okay, so let me just first of all, I had no idea that you were this very well, you know, established travel writer. You like were the are you still the editor at large at National Geographic Travel?
No, that magazine it folded a couple of years ago. So, I'm
how long ago did it fold? I mean, like many years ago.
Not Traveler folded. I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I stumbled into travel writing back in like 2004 or something like that. So almost 20 years now. And yeah, it was a big part of my life for a long time. And, you know, travel really changed my life in a real way. So then I started writing about it and stuff. So that was a real wonderful kind of creative rebirth for me when my acting was sort of not of very much interest.
So how did it kind of evolve? Like what happened? So you were kind of like after Weekend at Bernie's and all these other whatever
Well,
else.
what happened? I walked across Spain.
That's your new book, though. Is that
Well,
Walking
I
with
did
Sam?
in the new book, yeah. But 25 years, 27 years ago, I walked across Spain for the first time on the Camino de Santiago, and this old pilgrimage route for 500 miles, and that really changed my life. I found the short answer is it was revealed to me how much fear had sort of dominated my life in a way that I was unaware of. I was unaware of its even existence in my life until I had a moment in Spain where it was absent, and I suddenly felt like myself in a way that I rarely ever did, in the way that I wanted to feel. I felt, my wife is Irish, she has all these good Irish sayings, and one of them is, I felt like myself from the toes up. And in that moment in Spain, when I sort of realized that I was somehow free of fear for a brief instant, it changed my place in the world utterly overnight. And so that led me to keep traveling. And because I liked that feeling, so I wanted more of it. So I just kept traveling the world and traveling alone a lot. And that helped me to grow and sort of feel the further away from home I got, the more at home in myself I felt. And so then I started writing about it, and then I got successful quickly at writing about it because of two reasons. Because of that I knew travel was a profound, life-changing thing, and I also knew that tell a story. Don't sell a destination, tell a story. So I became a successful travel writer, by accident, really, and I loved it. I loved it for a long time. So, and now most magazines are gone now. So, most travel magazines now are just sort of lifestyle magazines.
Yeah.
But anyway, it had a big, and so that started me writing, and then I grew into books and the like, and then like I said, I walked across Spain again a couple of years ago with my son this time.
So did you like the evolution of that? Were you like just over acting? Like, did you know you were a writer like before, and you just kind of, or did you kind of like you said, stumble upon travel, then you started writing about it, and then recognize that you had this gift of writing? Like, what was the?
No, I never wrote anything. Like in school, I was terrible at school. I mean, I just smoked pot every day in school. I was terrible at school. I was kicked out of college after a couple of years. I had no interest in writing or reading. I didn't, I don't think I read a book till I was 30, and no, I mean, I remember where I was when I was in Saigon alone, and I'd spent the day, with this kid who drove by me on his little scooter, and he insisted I hop on his scooter, and he was going to give me a ride. And so I did, and I spent the day with this kid. He showed me around Saigon, and showed me like where his father was arrested and where his mother, the garden that she used to, public garden she attended. Anyway, I spent this really interesting day with this kid, and I went back to my hotel, and I was really still very jazzed up, and I didn't know what to do, and so there was just a piece of hotel stationery and a pen, and I just wrote it down, and I wrote down what happened, and I had the feeling, I finished writing that down, and I just sat back and I just went like, there I am. There I am. And it was the same feeling I had when I was 15 years old, when I walked out on stage in the first play I ever did as the Artful Dodger in high school. And I suddenly felt like, oh my God, there I am. And it was that exact same feeling. And so I just started writing stuff. And I wrote for years without showing anyone anything, because I just did it for me, to make me feel grounded, I suppose, or whatever the word would be. And anyway, I had no intentions or ambitions with it until one day when I did, and then that's what happened, and it just sort of grew from there. And I tend to be a bit of a loner, so I was very happy to sit alone in a room and write all day.
Right. It seems like it would be more your personality style, right? If that's something that you're naturally conditioned to. And then like the directing. So you also, like, again, you directed Orange is the New Black. You said it in one of your books, or your book, like when you directed Orange is the New Black for Netflix, and they basically put the whole thing up on in one day. Does that mean you directed the entire series, or the entire season of Orange?
No, I directed like 3 of those a year. So I would just do, and I directed a bunch of, I probably directed, I guess, about 100 hours of television now at this point. And, television directing is an interesting, that was, again, something I totally fell into. I had no ambition to be a TV director, but, and Orange is the New Black, I directed a couple shows just because I was curious, and some shows that I was on. And then a friend of mine was doing this new show on Netflix. This was before anything had come out on Netflix, and like Netflix sent you DVDs. That's how the business they were in, right? And so she couldn't get anyone to direct on her show because it was like, what's Netflix? And like, it's this thing, they're going to stream it. And you're like, well, what's streaming? What channel is it going to be on? Anyway, I just couldn't grasp this. And they couldn't get anyone to direct it. So they asked me to direct several of them. And then, of course, it becomes what it becomes. And suddenly I was a very good director because I directed a bunch of this show. And, nothing makes you good as success, So, and then I sort of fell into this being a TV director for a decade, which I still do. I just finished doing a show yesterday. And,
which show?
So, TV The Blacklist, which is something also I've been doing for 10 years now. And, TV directing is interesting, but ultimately at the end of the day, being a TV director is not that gratifying a work, in my opinion. It's like you're just servicing someone else's vision, really, So it's nice. It's nice living, and it's nice and it's interesting. It's like going to the gym, going to director gym. I always call TV. Like, different shows have different styles. So this week you're doing this style, next week you're doing that style. It's like this week chest, next week you're doing arms. You know what I mean? And so you get in great shape. But is it ultimately that creatively satisfying? Maybe not.
So first of all, so how do you even like you said, you just fell into it because they needed somebody, but how do you even know yes, you did movies on the other end of the camera, but how did you even know how to even direct a movie? I mean, a TV show, let alone do a series, like all these things. I know that you did, like I said, The Blacklist and all these things, but even when you started with The Orange is the New Black, how did you even know day one how to even do any of it? Could you remember watching?
I just did. Well, that's a good question. I spent so much of my life on a set, so I knew how to be. Nowhere was I more comfortable than on a set, and I know how much time is wasted on a set, and I hate waiting around on a set. And what makes you a good TV director, frankly, is being fast. If you have an idea on top of that, you're Orson Welles. So I was very fast and efficient and decisive. To be a good TV director, you have to